Some important voices on this continued challenge we have with opioid overdose. Welcome into my state of mind. I am Dan York on this Tuesday evening in the summer. It's pretty humid out there, huh? Don't complain. Do you remember the winter? Summer is waning. It's kind of a melancholy feeling. Kids are going back to school. College kids are already leaving. Can't stop the calendar from moving. Yeah, tonight we're going to talk about some of the challenges we have with opioid overdoses. And we've done a lot of shows on this, but there's some different perspective that I want you to hear from our guests. So stay with us on that. Let me run to the rundown real quick and just checklist a couple things that are on my state of mind this evening. Thank gosh we have a bounce back today. Here's a headline. So I don't know where the market is as you're watching this at 7:30 or 11:30 or midnight on Fox Providence, because we record late in the afternoon. It was about 250 points back up. It's a long road back to where the top was, and I think it's going to be a rocky road back. And there may not be a road back that we see before the end of the year or even next year, because we've got some turmoil. We have very little movement with the Fed in terms of, popping this economy. We're chugging along on our own engine right now. China's trying to do what they can. They lowered interest rates today. CBS has some insights.
What a difference a day makes. The Dow shot up more than 300 points in the first few minutes of trading Tuesday morning.
I believe the worst is over. We knew buyers would come into this market.
It comes a day after one of the wildest rides in Wall Street history. The Dow plunged more than 1,000 points in the opening minutes Monday. It recovered almost all of the losses by midday, only to drop again, ending the day down 588 points. Earlier today, China's major index tanked again. Afterward, regulators there cut interest rates in order to stimulate their slowing economy, the second largest in the world.
I'm not sure how that gentleman is so confident that the worst is over. I think the beginning of the roller coaster is right here. But just stay confident, stay cool, and if you're a single investor, then you don't really have much choice other than to just kind of ride it out. In Cranston, a vote of no confidence from the council. We've done a lot of opining on this one. The headline comes with a 5-4 vote, meaning 5 Democrats voted that they have no confidence in the mayor based on the state police report that has wreaked havoc in that city. One Democrat crossed over and said, I'm good with the mayor. Of course, 3 Republicans stuck with him. Eyewitness News was there.
In a 5-4 vote, Cranston City Council vote no confidence in Mayor Alan Fung. The vote stems from the release of Rhode Island State Police's damaging report into the Cranston Police Department.
Does any of this make you nervous?
No, I trust and put my faith in the voters and residents of the city of Cranston. That's who I'm concerned with.
Opposing views from residents ahead of the mayor's no confidence vote.
I oppose this. He's a good man. He does the right thing. We're trying. He's tried. We all are in this together.
I've known Alan for a long time. He's not the same person that I knew at MetLife.
We have seen many mayors come and go. We have a good mayor right now.
I think it further underscores the fact that he doesn't understand or recognize right from wrong.
Listen, this can all be white noise to you. You need to read the report. Whether you live in Cranston or not, the state police report on the Cranston Police Department is a must read. Coming up, I think, on the Thursday show, today's Tuesday, we're going to have a differing point of view about the legitimacy of that state police report, so stay tuned for that. But, Alan Fung met with reporters today and got kind of cocky.
It's not about no confidence. I could care less what the council president said last night about that, because where I want to have the confidence is in the residents of the city of Cranston.
Wouldn't you like to have some high-level statesmanship? I mean, this guy is all over the map and acts like a juvenile. He really does. I mean, wouldn't you want somebody who's already expressed his worry about the confidence that people have in him to just be able to say about the council vote, well, it's predictable. I've got a confidence problem right now and I need to build it back. And so I'm sure I will, and I look forward to working with the council. Instead, I don't care what they do. I could care less. This 14-year-old bravado on the part of the mayor doesn't bode well for him, the people of Cranston. And right now, a lot of people are saying, thank God he didn't get elected governor. 10% raise, you might bristle over that. The Providence Journal threw this headline in today as a negotiation with the state troopers resulted in that number. They were looking for more. I know that this probably raises the hair on the back of a lot of taxpayers, but note this, the commensurate pay for a state trooper in Rhode Island has been significantly less than that in Connecticut and Massachusetts. And the one thing that we can say about Rhode Island is that we've got a heck of a state police force. This one doesn't bug me. If it bugs you, let us know. I also want you to let me know about the DCYF. It's a mess, and this headline reflects that the lawsuit that has been putting a lot of pressure on this institution continues despite Governor Raimondo's apparent good faith efforts to rebuild that entire agency. You know, unless you are in the system or, you know, a customer of the system, you really don't know how bad this thing is. And frankly, I'm not, and so I only hear war stories about the disorganization, the lousy treatment. Read the lawsuit. It's tough. But if you've got a story reflecting on the efficiencies of DCYF, feel free to contact us here at Your State of Mind. We'll post that contact page coming up here momentarily. We'd like to hear from you. And a good run for the Cranston Little League, no doubt about it. It was tough to see them lose, but you know what? They did, I think, with good spirit. Another headline here probably shows that they did give it their all, and the coach was pragmatic.
Every time you play an elimination game, the teams get tougher and tougher and tougher. I mean, there wasn't maybe one easy out there, two easy outs. They just kept coming. I felt like I was riding waves at a beach. They just kept coming. I mean, you know, you didn't have an easy out. And they were very good, and I wish them well. And I'm very proud of our season. So I have no complaints. We were beat by a better team tonight. That's all there is to it.
Straightforward. Good run for the Cranston Western Little League team. You know, somebody called me on the radio show on WPRO weekdays, noon to 3 today, talking about the culture of excellence in Rhode Island Little League. With all of the complaints that individual had about the culture of politics in Little League, he couldn't figure out why there was such an excellence in sport. Maybe we should have some coaches spend some time at the State House. Your State of Mind is important to us. 228-1886. Give me a ring. We'll play your voicemail. stateofmind@myritv.com. Certainly, if you've got some thoughts on DCYF, we'd like to hear from you. Here's a reaction on Facebook from Dino over Gina Raimondo's spending of $230,000 of our taxpayer money in order to convince us that her truck toll plan is appropriate. It's an outrageous decision by the Raimondo administration, and you should let her know. When we come back, we'll take a look at the opioid challenge from a different perspective. Stay with us. You know, every time I see a story or an op-ed piece on this epidemic problem we have in the state, I feel like, oh, we got to get somebody else in here a different perspective, because the conversation has got to, you know, stay alive. Look at this op-ed piece headline that we saw and was the catalyst for us to invite our guests in today. Rhode Island must address the opioid epidemic. Well, I think, Dr. Kressman, everybody agrees with that, but how to get it done is a whole nother story, don't you think?
Yeah, I agree, Dan. And I think the first question is, what's the question?
Okay. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you.
Just want to make sure I say hello to both. Pretty rude to start with Dr. Krausman, don't you think? I'm just, you know, you can't take me anywhere. You are the general manager of the TrueMed Medical Offices, which is a for-profit business, correct?
Ocean State Urgent Care Centers,
right.
Yes.
And you are a nurse.
I am.
By trade, but you're running these operations, so you've seen a lot. And you are a professor at Brown.
I'm a clinical professor at Brown.
Noted on that op-ed
Yes.
piece, but you're practicing.
I practice, and medical students come to our sites, and we teach them there.
Okay. So getting to, you asked, what is the question?
What is the question? People talk about the opioid epidemic, and they mean different things.
So define opioid for everybody, again.
Medications or drugs like heroin, or like morphine, or like OxyContin. And when you talk to most people about it, they mean different things. Some people mean there are people dying of heroin overdoses in the streets, and that's true. Rhode Island has a terrible problem with heroin overdose. 250 people died last year, and that's a crazy number. But that's the tip of the iceberg. Other people mean the opioid epidemic, referring to the 3,000 or 4,000 heroin addicts in Rhode Island, or the 10 or 20 or 30,000 prescription pill addicts in Rhode Island.
How do we know if it's 10 or 20 or 30?
There's data on this.
That's a wide range.
Yeah, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Administration, which is the CDC for the federal government that applies to substance abuse, They do surveys every year. And if you define it rather lightly, you're probably talking about 20 or 30,000 people who use prescription medications inappropriately in a state the size of Rhode Island. If you describe it more tightly, namely they're having problems with their life because of their addiction, they're trying to quit and can't quit, they're losing families, that sort of thing, it's probably a smaller number, but still measurable in tens of thousands.
Okay, so let's talk about that part first. I know you want to talk about some social issues and some mental health issues, and I don't think that's gotten enough attention when it comes to this opioid conversation. But the contemporary conversation that we've been having is, don't get all stereotypical about opioid addiction and the heroin addict there on the street, you know, looking down on them as if they're that kind of, you know, homeless loser that, you know, could have turned their life around but made some bad decisions. Oh, well. We have a lot of people who are in this prescription cycle, correct? You're seeing them?
Correct.
Tell me about it.
People like you and me, the working class population, they have an illness, an injury, something specific that causes them to need Vicodin, Percocet, etc. They take the medication for a short period of time, but then they feel as though they still need it. Their body becomes addicted to it. They become dependent on the medication. It's a very sad spiral that they go on. They get more prescriptions from their doctor, they continue to take it, and then they go the next step. They just can't stop taking it. They're working every day, and they continue.
Has the medical field been irresponsible?
People would say that, but if you actually look at the medical field, for the most part, physicians prescribe according to guidelines. The problem is, for the last decade to 2 decades, the guidelines have been to treat pain and to err on the side of not leaving a patient in pain untreated. That being said, there's a lot of opiates out there, and most patients that Jen just described aren't getting them from their doctors, okay? The majority of patients are getting them from friends and family. So
because they still want it. Because the doctor said, no, Mas, I'm done with you're done. Yes?
Sometimes. Or sometimes I'm prescribing for grandma, and appropriately grandma doesn't do well on medications like ibuprofen because she's a geriatric patient. So grandma, for her arthritis, gets Percocet or oxycodone, but grandson or child is taking the medication from grandma. And so that's a big problem. So many patients are prescribed appropriately, but don't safeguard their medications.
How fast does this addiction occur? I mean, listen, I told the story a million times on radio and TV. I mean, I had 4 teeth pulled. I had a Vicodin prescription. I took one. I didn't like the way I felt on it. I said, you know what? I'll just load up on Advil because I don't like this at all. And but I'll tell you that that pill box sat on the shelf for a good 6-8 months before I got it to the police station to discard it appropriately. Nobody stole it. My kid didn't steal it. But I got buddies who got back pain who, and I'm thinking, God, whoa, those are the guys that are in trouble, right? But how much of that medicine do you take before all of a sudden the dependency is created, in general?
In general, it takes more than 1 dose. You need to be on it for a period of time, likely weeks or months. That being said, there are some people like you who are lucky. They take the pills, they get nauseated, or they don't get anything more than pain relief. Other people, even with 1 or 2 doses,
loopy,
or euphoria, they feel really good, and then they start to chase that feeling. And you can't tell by talking to somebody whether they're going to be the one who gets appropriate pain relief or somebody who gets that euphoria.
All right, so what do we do about this syndrome? There's other syndromes that you want to talk about, but what do we do about this syndrome?
We have to treat the syndrome, but we also need to treat the underlying causes that go along with this syndrome. We need to treat their mental health issues that they will most probably have. If you don't treat the mental health issues, you're not going to cure the patient.
But what's the percentage? I'm worried about people I know who just have back pain. I mean, the over 50 crowd that plays golf with me. I bet you a handful of the guys I play with, knock down a pill or two every once in a while, more than Advil. To just, they're not psychologically challenged necessarily. They're just playing on the edge. What's the percentage of those types that have been prescribed for pain who just begin to say, oh, I'm going somewhere with this, with a predisposed mental challenge, so to speak? Is that a high percentage or a low percentage?
I would guess it's a low percentage, but I'm guessing. I don't think anybody has tight numbers on that because that's not a population you can easily get your hands around. Your friends aren't coming in and saying, okay, you know, I've got a problem, until they have a problem. And by then, it's certainly further down that pathway.
All right, so our message to the everyday, non-drug addicted, but pain afflicted, getting older types, be careful, try not to.
Take what you need, but no more.
And get rid of it.
And then get rid of it.
Okay.
And the safeguarding and getting rid of it is critical, because, you know, you leave it in your medicine cabinet, somebody else comes over and they take it. The
Which
maid,
is weird.
the kid, the grandkid.
Yeah, it's hard for me to grasp that, but you're telling me that's rampant.
Oxycodone has a street value of between $1 and $5 per milligram, which
Meaning?
means your 5 milligram pill is worth at least $5 to somebody. Would you leave a stack of cash in your medicine cabinet?
And then there's some other stuff they're worried about next. Even during the break, Jenna is telling me about some of the things that happen at the office where people are coming in, you know, shopping for Vicodin and all that kind of stuff. If you just tuned in, we're talking about the opioid crisis, and Dr. Krausman and Jen Zuba are here from TrueMed Medical Offices. But I mean, you didn't write that op-ed piece to draw business to your.
No.
You wrote it because you were concerned about what's going on, thinking about Rhode Island's addressing the opioid epidemic. But just as a follow-up to our last conversation, you were just telling me people do anything to get their hands on this medicine, correct?
They will, yes.
They fake diagnosis, or they bring charts, x-rays?
They will bring any supportive documentation they need to validate the need
What
to
do you
get a
do when somebody
narcotic.
comes? Obviously, they've been to another doctor and been turned away.
There is a great resource now called the PNP. It is a database that you can look on as a provider, a physician. You can look up a patient, any patient, and it will show Dan York got Vicodin at this emergency room on this date, who prescribed it, how many they got. You can look, it goes back almost 2 years now, I think, and you can see how many times these patients have gotten these prescriptions and where they've gotten them and how much they've gotten. Then you can confront the patient and say, you know, I know you got your medication at your primary care office last week. You were given 90 pills. There is no way you need one. And then sometimes the backpedaling will start, well, I lost it, or it was stolen, or it's very unfortunate.
Does this happen daily?
Daily, multiple times a day.
It's fascinating. I mean, it's sad, but it's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then you think there's some mental health issues and some social issues that kind of combine here.
Well, you have to look at the social context. If we're looking at an epidemic, you're not going to be able to fix it by focusing on doctor prescribing or on, you know, how many pills you give to a particular patient. You've got to look at the other drivers of the equation. So it's sort of like when you were in grade school and you had those long algebra problems with 10 variables. Well, one variable is the doctor. Another variable, you know, certainly might be the cost of heroin, which has gone way, way down. But other things you must look at are things like the mental health system. 50% of people with an opioid addiction have a mental health problem, whether it's bipolar or depression or PTSD. That's a significant issue, and you need to treat that as much as the opioid addiction if you want to be successful.
Well, who's trying to be successful? You know, this is the thing. Who's trying to be successful? Do patients recognize they have problems?
Sometimes patients will come to you, family members will bring patients in. Family members who are patients will cry in your office that their son or their loved one has a problem. And when patients do recognize they have a problem, they're showing up at sites of acute care. They're going to emergency rooms, they're going to urgent care facilities, or frankly, they're having something else that brings them into contact with acute care.
You don't get a lot of mental health help at those facilities.
They're not designed for that.
So what do?
Well,
I mean, how many shrinks and psychologists are in the marketplace taking patients?
If you look at Rhode Island, the estimates are about 15 to 20 less than you need that focus on addiction. So you've got about 30 or 40 right now, and you need to have about 60 or 70 if you want to meet the need.
Well, it's a private medical field. I mean, it's a career choice. How do you get people who are of the caliber to serve in that capacity?
Well, in part it's follow the money, okay? Right now, mental health does not reimburse comparably to other fields of endeavor. So people going into psychiatry or psychology largely are not taking insured patients because the insurances don't pay them enough to cover their costs. At least that's the story that's out there.
So is that a national dynamic or a Rhode Island dynamic? What, your headline was Rhode Island must address opioid epidemic. What can Rhode Island do?
Well, two things. One, it is a Rhode Island and a national epidemic. Rhode Island does have all of the national problems, but Rhode Island's epidemic is actually worse. We have more adolescents using drugs in Rhode Island than the national average. So 15% of our adolescents use drugs compared to 10% nationally. We have more people that meet the definition of drug abuse in Rhode Island than nationally. So all of the trends are out there, but it's more, the word is worse. Or as my baseball coach used to say, worse-er.
So if I'm the governor or the Speaker of the House, and I'm really concerned about this, I ask you for a 3-step program. What is it?
Well, I'm going to tell you, Massachusetts has a 65-step program. So I don't think it can be done in 3 steps. And one of the points of my op-ed piece was that there isn't a simple solution for this. You've got a number of major social issues that must be addressed if we want to successfully combat this opioid epidemic. It's not going to be a quick fix, next year it's better. And one of my big concerns is if you just follow the people who are dying from IV overdoses, that's going to start to turn down naturally. All epidemics go up and then come down, okay, whether you do something about them or not. The sort of below the surface iceberg, that's the problem. The fact that there are 250 people who died in Rhode Island last year is a terrible tragedy. If we do all of the right things, those numbers will come down faster and farther. If we do nothing, I'm sure that a year or two from now, that 250 will be 220 or 210, and somebody's going to pat themselves on the back for having done something smart. You've got 3,000 or 4,000 IV heroin abusers. At some point, with 250 dying per year every year, there are going to be 2,000 heroin IV abusers, and you're not going to have 250 people die that year. You'll have 175.
Okay.
That won't be an improvement.
So, in a minute's time, what do you do? I mean, what do you do?
Well, Massachusetts' 65-point plan is a good place to start.
Well, I'll have to go read that and have you back and talk about it, because I don't know what the Massachusetts plan is. Do we need all 65 points?
No, but we need to be focusing on all those social issues. We need to look at what's going on in the prisons. Why aren't we doing medical-assisted therapy to people who have heroin addiction and opioid addiction in the prisons? Why aren't we doing better transitions between the pediatric mental health world and the adult mental health world? And again, I know it cuts across all strata, but why do we have, 1,000 chronically homeless people in Rhode Island? And I know 3/4 of them are not opioid addicts, but 1/4 of them are, and they're high risk.
This feels too big. Is this fixable?
It's fixable, but it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of collaboration from many people.
All right.
Education and identification are the key.
All right, let's all look up the 65-point plan in Massachusetts, and we'll report back. I'll have my guests back, because I'm curious and concerned. Thanks. Appreciate your coming.
Thank
One
you.
more thing when we come back, please. So I said to the doc, where do I find the report? He said, oh, it's right here. So I've got some reading to do, but you can go to www.mass.gov/stopaddiction, and you can read it too. This opioid thing is really out of control, problematic, and so multifaceted. It feels like it's almost too big a problem to resolve, but that's never been our attitude. So I'll do some homework, have our guests back. Maybe you should too. Hey, if you're concerned, you'll do a little bit of work. See you on the radio tomorrow at noon on WPRO.